8 Sinister Craigslist encounters revealed. Spine-chilling true horrors that will haunt your sleep. Sarah never thought that clicking on a free family photography session ad on Craigslist would plunge her into a nightmarish chase. At 34, single, and barely keeping her head above water working 2 jobs, her heart raced with hope. Memories with her kids. Beautiful photos, laughter shared. She needed that something to hold on to. Yet, just a tap away, an unseen danger lurked, waiting for the right moment to snatch her joy. On the day of the session, Sarah felt a knot creep into her stomach as she drove down desolate roads beyond the flickering street lamps of Kansas City's suburban sprawl. The afternoon sun hung low, casting eerie shadows on the crumbling structures around her. The advertisement's allure faded like the sunlight, replaced with an unsettling chill. She parked beneath a weathered for sale sign, nervousness spilling over her like ice water. They were here, just a photo away from joy. Greg waved from across a yard littered with discarded relics of better days. His smile was wide, disarming even. A tickle of doubt fluttered at the edge of her thoughts, but she brushed it aside. This was about her children. As the session began, the shuddering laughter of her kids crumbled into an uncomfortable silence. Greg, with the charm of a haunting specter, seemed to melt into the background, his camera clicking with a rhythm that felt offbeat. "What does a typical day look like for you?" he asked, the question heavy in the air. Her thoughts stumbled, unsure how to keep things light under his unsettling scrutiny. Just the usual chaos," she replied, nervously laughing. Her children squirmed, confused. "Challenges faced as a single mother?" He probed again, eyes piercing through her like glass shards, razor-sharp and undistracted. The bright smile remained plastered on his face, but something about it felt forced, unnatural. In an instant, unease settled into her stomach, a visceral warning that something wasn't right. Then came the moment that made her blood freeze. "What are your full names?" he asked. Sarah hesitated. Why did he need to know that? Surely it was just some professional protocol. But as he snapped more photos with a fervor that felt too consuming, an unsettling realization washed over her. Shadows seemed to draw closer as daylight dwindled, the once welcoming scenery transforming into something menacing. A flicker of movement caught her eye. Was it the trees, or the empty houses? They loomed like giants, hollow-eyed, their windows soaking up the last glimmers of dusk. Panic clawed at her throat as the sun sank lower, the last of the light chased away by a heavy blanket of fear as Greg leaned in closer. "Are you really sure you know what you're getting into, Sarah?" The urgency in his whisper snaked through her. Those words dripped with an ominous weight that flooded her whole being. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue." Panic rose like bile in her throat. This was no ordinary photo shoot. Who was this man, and what did he want from them? As twilight slipped into darkness, and as shadows stretched and wrapped around them, Sarah's heartbeat whirred in her chest like a mad engine. Her mind raced. The weight of Greg's gaze felt palpable. She needed to escape. Gathering her children, she hissed softly, "We're leaving." But the night had barely begun, and Sarah had unknowingly stepped into a trap woven within the fabric of her suburban nightmare. What would happen next? Would they even make it back to safety? Sarah's heart raced as she grabbed her children's hands, their small fingers trembling in hers. "Let us go," she urged, her voice sharp and commanding, cutting through the tension like a knife. But panic had taken root in the children. They looked up at her with wide, confused eyes, as if trying to grasp their mother's fear. Greg's smile faltered, just for a fraction of a second, but it was enough. "It's getting dark. You shouldn't rush," he said, his tone shifting smooth like ice, uncomfortably calm. The camera hung from his neck like a noose, swaying ever so slightly as he stepped closer, blocking her path. Not another step. Sarah shouted, her voice trembling yet fierce. The urge to flee surged within her, but Greg's presence felt suffocating, an invisible net closing in around them. "Why don't we just take one last picture?" he asked, grinning wider, his teeth sharper than before. The air turned thick with dread, the yard around them morphing into a grotesque stage for this twisted game. The flickering streetlights barely illuminated the path back to the car, shadows deepening dangerously around the edges. She turned, pulling her children with her. Panic surged with every hurried step. "Stay close, don't look back," she whispered. But whispers were never enough to contain terror. Each hurried footfall seemed to echo in the emptiness, the echoes swallowed by the encroaching darkness. Suddenly, a distant howl pierced the night, a haunting cry that shattered what was left of her composure. Her pulse quickened. Was it the wind, or something worse lurking just beyond the rustic decay? Uncertainty gnawed at her as they hurried toward the car, their breaths coming in sharp gasps, mixing with fear. As the vehicle loomed within sight, Sarah felt the oppressive weight of Greg's gaze following them. It clung to her like a suffocating fog. "You can't leave yet," he called out, his cheerful voice unsettling as shadows danced behind him. "We haven't finished our session." She fumbled to unlock the car, hands shaking, beads of sweat pooling at her temples. "Get inside. Now!" she hissed, desperate. The door creaked open, and she practically shoved her children into the back seat, her heart racing in sync with the rising panic. "Why did you leave the camera here?" One of her children whimpered, pointing at the yard where Greg stood, the vacant space where he had placed the tripod. A shiver snaked down Sarah's spine. It was like a spider watching them intently, waiting for the right moment to strike. She locked the car doors, a futile gesture that felt both protective and hopeless. Greg stepped forward, a menacing smile still stitched across his face. "You've got so much to share with me, like where you live." He grinned, his eyes narrowing with twisted delight. "We should have a follow-up conversation." Her breath hitched. The engine whined to life, but the power couldn't compare to the dread knotting in her chest. She slammed the car into gear, tires screeching against the gravel as she gunned it out of that cursed driveway. The road ahead twisted into the dark, the trees like clawing fingers reaching out, threatening to pull her back. But even as she fled, doubt crept in. Was he still watching? Did he know where she lived? The relentless howl echoed in her mind, along with Greg's unsettling words. They sped away, but the gnawing sense of being hunted burrowed deep inside her. Sarah glanced in the rearview mirror. No one followed immediately, but the darkness behind seemed to writhe. Shadows became entities of their own, and terror coiled within her gut. Exhaustion washed over her when the urgency of escape turned to the creeping specter of dread. She needed to unravel this nightmare, to shield her family from the lurking danger. But the real question remained, what had she truly stepped into? And just as that thought settled into her mind, a flicker of light caught her attention, bright against the void. It pulsed and flickered like a flame, drawing her curiosity closer. When she turned to find the source, on the opposite side of the street it was the same free family photography session sign, lit by a single bulb, as if mocking her desperate flight. Fear knotted tighter in her chest. What had she started? The tires screeched against the pavement as Sarah's foot pressed harder on the gas pedal, desperation thrumming through her veins. The sickening glow of the street sign haunted her thoughts. It wasn't just a sign anymore, it was a beacon, taunting her, threading through her mind like a sinister specter. "Mom!" One of her children cried from the back seat, panic lacing their voice. "What is happening? Why is that man following us?" Their innocent fear twisted the knife deeper in Sarah's gut. She fought a wave of nausea threatening to pull her under. "He's not following us," she lied, though her heart protested. Her hands gripped the wheel, knuckles white, as she turned down a narrow side road. The headlights barely penetrated the thickening fog, shaping the trees into grotesque figures that seemed to close in, as if they, too, were watching. She dared a glance in the rearview mirror. For a split second, she thought she saw a darkness swirl, forming into Greg's imposing shape at the edge of the yard they just fled. But when she blinked, nothing remained but the fog swirling behind. Just her imagination? Anxiety gnawed at her relentlessly. The kids were sobbing now, and their cries sent shockwaves through her, amplifying the misery she already felt. "Please, Mom!" the younger one pleaded, "I want to go home." Each word topped with a trembling edge, ripping through her resolve. "Just hold on. I promise we'll be safe soon," she rushed, struggling to sound convincing. They spun around a corner, the tires squealing as she veered off the main road. Every twist felt like fate teasing, mocking, daring them to escape. With every passing moment, night deepened, and the oppressive silence in the car weighed like lead. She focused ahead, where ghostly shadows danced at the periphery of her vision. The trees felt alive, whispering dark secrets, urging her to turn back. But she wouldn't. Suddenly, the motor sputtered, a hideous cough erupting from the engine. Panic flared up as she wrestled with the steering wheel. "No, no, no! Not now!" The car shuddered violently, then rolled to a stuttering halt in the middle of the road. A cold sweat broke out across Sarah's forehead. The children went silent, the suffocating dread picking at her sanity. She put her head down on the wheel, inhaling sharply as she tried to steady her breathing. "It was just a glitch, right? Just a stupid glitch," she whispered to herself. The stillness outside was unnerving until the echo of footsteps crunched on the gravel. The sound sent her heart racing again. She braced herself, peeking through the window. A figure stepped into the beam of light from the headlights. It was Greg, still holding the camera, a twisted smile plastered across his face like a grotesque mask. "Thought you could run away?" he sang, his sing-song voice chilling her straight to the core. Fear paralyzed her as they locked eyes. "Let us have that chat we didn't finish." Her heart pounded in her chest like a war drum. In that moment, she had a choice. Do she stay and face him, or try to flee again? Adrenaline surged through her, and just like that, she was back in survival mode. With trembling hands, she quickly fumbled for the gear shift, praying for any sign of life from the engine. "Don't!" her daughter shrieked, but Sarah couldn't listen. She had to get away. The engine coughed, then roared back to life, a miracle that spurred her into action. Tires spun for a second before gripping the road, and she shot forward, adrenaline overriding her fear. She glanced back quickly. Greg stood still grinning, as if he welcomed the game. She turned sharply, speeding down another side road, heart hammering wildly. But what if he was waiting? What if he knew where she was going? Sweat dripped down her temples as the shadows seemed to close in again, claws eager to grasp her by the neck. Her mind raced, but there was no time to think. What had she truly awakened? What darkness had she unleashed upon her family? The night stretched on, eerie and endless. Then, just ahead, a figure emerged in the headlights. Backlit by a pulsing street lamp, its features cloaked in shadow. Sarah squinted, her gut tightening. Could it be? And as she approached, a familiar, horrifying realization clawed at her. The face shone with a devilish grin, eyes glinting with something sinister. What had she encountered now? The question lingered, cold and unwelcome, as they hurtled toward the unknown. The figure stepped closer, its outline becoming sharper in the harsh glow of the headlights. Heart pounding, Sarah could barely breathe. "What are you doing here?" she whispered, half to herself, half to the wretched reality threatening to swallow her whole. As they neared, the face came into full view. It was a woman she recognized, a neighbor, someone she had once shared a warm smile and a wave with during brief encounters in the neighborhood. But this woman now wore an expression of madness. Her hair hung in unkempt clumps, eyes wild, as if she had seen too much darkness. "You shouldn't have come here, Sarah," she hissed, voice low and gravelly, a sharp contrast to the cheery greetings of the past. What do you mean?" Sarah stammered, fighting the urge to cover her children's ears, to shield them from potential horrors. Terror seeped from the woman's every word. "The darkness knows you now," she warned, stepping closer, her fingers twitching unnaturally. "You woke it when you ran away. He won't let you leave." Sarah's gut clenched, a visceral dread echoing through her being. "Leave us alone! I just want to get my kids away from him!" she shouted, fear layering her voice. The woman laughed, a sound devoid of sanity, echoing into the night. "You think you can escape him? He's with you, always. You can't hide from what you conjured." Time froze. Instinct screamed at her to drive away, but the oppressive weight of the situation pressed down. What had Greg done? Had he unleashed something more than just terror? The car felt like a fragile barricade against an inevitable storm. The woman leaned in closer, captivated by the thrill of fear. "You need to open your eyes, Sarah. He's coming for you." Suddenly, a loud bang on the back of the car startled them all. Sarah jumped, sweat trickling down her back as she spun around to see Greg's figure approaching, the camera raised like a weapon, recording their fear. A low hum of laughter emanated from him as he reveled in this twisted game. "Mom! Please!" her daughter cried, clutching her brother, both wide-eyed with terror. Sarah's heart shattered for their innocence that had now been shattered by this nightmare. She gritted her teeth, willing herself to focus. "I'm not afraid of you," she yelled, even as her insides twisted with doubt. But a flicker of determination ignited in her. She would not let Greg win. "Sarah," the neighbor hissed, "you're only just beginning." With a roaring gasp, she slammed the car into drive and pressed the gas pedal hard. The tires squealed, the headlights illuminating Greg's face just as he lunged forward. The woman screamed, a chilling sound that resonated deep within Sarah, but the darkness closed in behind them as they fled. Each glance in the rearview felt like sacrilege. The shadows distorted, rushing forward as if they were alive, hungry for what they had lost. Greg remained a menacing silhouette in the distance, the camera capturing every moment. As they skidded around another turn, adrenaline surged through Sarah. "Hold on!" she shouted to her children as the road veered sharply, unexpected dips tossing them against their seatbelts. But no sooner had she rounded the bend than the headlights flickered. Fear clawed at her throat as the car sputtered, the engine coughing just as it had before. "No, please stay with me!" The kid's terrified cries mixed with her own desperation. The engine wheezed, sighing under the pressure. Then, darkness began to thicken outside, filling the edges of their vision as if the world was dimming around them. "What is happening?" her daughter whimpered, panic seeping through her voice. Sarah's eyes darted to the rearview mirror. There, behind them, the shadows twisted and writhed, and from them emerged forms that made her blood run cold. She could see faces, once familiar but now grotesque, futures mourning for the past, eyes glimmering in the suffocating darkness. The car came to a juddering stop, the sound echoing in the stillness. "This isn't over, Sarah," the neighbor's voice whispered in the night, fading with the engine's last heartbeat. As darkness wrapped around them, Sarah turned to her children, heart racing. They needed to escape this nightmare, but how? A low growl emanated from outside the car, sending a shiver coursing through her. It was then she realized that what they faced wasn't just Greg. It was something more sinister, something that feasted on fear itself. And suddenly, the reality dawned on her: there was nowhere left to run. What could they face now? The blackness outside felt alive, pulsating with malevolence. Fear wrapped around Sarah like a suffocating blanket. Her heart thudded in her chest as she scanned the surroundings, trying to pierce through the void. "Mom!" her son whined. "I don't like it. I want to go home." His small voice trembled, each word a blade that cut through her resolve. A low growl reverberated again, closer this time. Sarah's skin prickled, ice coursing through her veins. She peered through the windshield, desperate for a sign of safety, but the night offered no comfort, just shadows that seemed to shift and whisper. "Stay calm," she urged her children, her voice straining to be soothing even as panic clawed at her throat. "We're okay. We're going to be okay." But deep down, she faltered. The neighbor had warned her. The darkness was just behind them. It was closing in, creeping beneath the surface of their reality. Tightening her grip on the steering wheel, she glanced to her side. "What's wrong with the car?" she muttered, more to herself than anyone else. The dash lights flickered, a weak protest against the encroaching dark. The engine sputtered again, a wheeze more like a death rattle than an engine cry for help. "Mom, I'm scared," her daughter whispered, eyes wide like saucers, reflecting the ghostly glows from the dash. Then came a loud bang against the driver's side door, making her jump, fingers gripping the steering wheel so tightly it hurt. She shot a glance at the mirror, only to see the silhouettes of figures moving closer, their shapes bending and twisting, barely human, all shadows with eyes that glimmered with hunger. "Please, let us go," her son cried, barely containing his rising hysteria. A glimpse of movement made Sarah flinch. Her eyes darted to the back seat, her heart dropping when she saw a shadow creeping along the window. It was too long, too unnatural. "No!" She slammed her foot on the gas, but instead of roaring to life, the car only stuttered. The engine whined like a wounded animal, sputtering out its last breath. The headlights flickered one last time, lighting up the figures now standing just feet away. "What is happening?" Sarah's voice cracked as she looked at her kids, who were pressed against the windows, eyes darting to the monstrous shapes now looming outside. Then, as if in mockery, a haunting laugh floated through the air, discordant and chilling. It echoed around her, bouncing off the trees lining the road, a cruel reminder of their isolation. "You can't run, Sarah!" "Greg," she hissed under her breath, fury igniting alongside terror. "This is all your fault." But there was no time to dwell on that. She had to protect her kids. With a burst of adrenaline, she pushed at the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. "Mom! Mom! Help!" her daughter screamed, terror tearing through every syllable. Sarah tried again, pulling until her fingers ached, but the door remained sealed, the outside world slowly encroaching, each figure now fully visible, distorted and grinning as if they enjoyed the fear coursing through her veins. "Please open! Let us go!" she shouted into the night, her voice rising as the shadows drew nearer. Just then, the rear door slid open, unleashing a gust of night air that rattled the remnants of her sanity. A form stood there, Greg, eyes gleaming, camera aimed directly at her desperation. "You think this is a game, Sarah?" he sneered, the camera almost vibrating with his excitement. "No! Get away from us!" she screamed, slapping her hands against the window, dread spilling over like a dark tide threatening to drown them. Inside the fear, a thought flickered. What if they could use the darkness against him? Despair turned to a frenzied idea. "Kids! Get ready!" As if reading her mind, the shadows laughed, an echoing chorus resonating deeply. And just like that, she grasped a piece of hope. If the horror had come from him, perhaps it could be turned back against him. "Together we fight," she urged her children, her heart pounding as she prepared to wage war against the darkness threatening to consume them. But would they have the strength to push back? Or would their voices drown in the laughter of shadows, forever lost in the night? A figure at the window grinned wider, eyes swirling with malice, and Sarah was left wondering, was this the end of their escape, or merely the beginning of something far worse? With a loud, deafening roar, the creature lunged toward the car. Shadows tangled in its form as if they were alive, swirling around it in a grotesque dance. Sarah's heartbeat quickened, each thud echoing in her ears as she locked eyes with her children, fear mirrored in both their faces. "Hold on!" she screamed, her voice broken and raw. She slammed her foot down again on the gas pedal, desperation fueling every ounce of her will. The car coughed and wheezed in protest, but her fierce determination ignited a flicker of movement. The tires spun madly, and for a moment, it felt like they might actually break free. Then, just as suddenly, the engine wheezed again, sputtering as if it were protesting against her demands. Shadows leapt closer, licking at the car's sides, hungry for the flesh within. With horror, she realized the fog smothering the headlights was not fog at all. It was a writhing mass of dark figures, moving in anticipation. "Mom!" her son wailed, his voice darting through her mind, each syllable soaked in terror. A thud sounded as something slammed against the rear door, rattling the whole vehicle. Sarah whipped around to see that grotesque smile, the same shadowed face she had glimpsed a moment before now loomed with dreadful clarity. It pressed against the glass, the eyes hungry, gleaming like shards of glass in the moonlight. "Stop! Please!" She banged her fist against the window in a futile attempt to re-establish their sanctuary, but it was like a trap, closing in on them. She felt her daughter grip her arm, nails digging in as the car trembled. "Mom, I can feel it watching us," her daughter whimpered, eyes darting wildly. "No! It's not going to take us!" Sarah shrieked, channeling a fierce protectiveness. "We're fighting back." Though her hands shook, she fumbled around the glove compartment and pulled out a flashlight, illuminating the shadow-laden interior of the car. It felt too small, stifling under the weight of the darkness outside. Her hands trembled with terror and resolve. "What do we do?" her son asked, his voice trembling. "Just trust me." Sarah steadied the flashlight and pointed it toward the dark, narrowing her eyes to focus on the shapes. The light flickered against them, and in that instant she saw the thing recoil slightly, shadows shifting with a hiss. It was responding suddenly. It wasn't as invincible as it had seemed. "Listen to me, kids," she commanded, edging her voice between urgency and fear. "When I say go, we panic together and make as much noise as possible. We really need to scare it." "No, Mom!" they cried, but she pressed on. "Now!" they screamed, a primal mix of fear and defiance, letting the sound echo into the night as they hammered on windows and seats. Sarah's heart thundered, but she couldn't afford to relent. She had to fight for their survival. The creature shrieked, its sound a terrible, high-pitched wail that rattled the car. The figures outside swirled and coiled, drawn by the sound only to hesitate, shifting closer yet not quite daring to engulf them entirely. Uncertainty twisted through their bloodthirsty eyes. "Harder!" Sarah urged. "It's working!" But even as she pushed them harder, dread settled deep in her gut, tension rising in the tight space of their car. What if this was merely temporary? What if the darkness only waited for them to grow weak, to tire? Then, just as the shadows began to pull back, revealing an unnerving calm in the chaotic darkness, Sarah spotted something moving just beyond the shadows. Something larger, more menacing, looming. "Mom, what's that?" her son whispered, voice barely audible. Out of the dark, the figure stepped forward, and her blood ran cold. It wore a mask silent and stone-faced, a reflection of their fear that sent shivers racing down her spine. "Shut up!" it hissed with a voice like grinding metal. Sarah realized they would have to face this now. This was no longer a fight for survival, they were staring straight into evil itself. And it was only just beginning. What other horrors awaited them in the night? The face behind the mask shifted, a flat gaze boring into Sarah's soul. Each heartbeat felt like a countdown. Fear coiled tightly within her, winding around her insides until she barely registered her daughter's whimper or her son's panicked breathing. Darkness pressed against the windows, thick and oppressive like a tangible force, and the once cacophonous cries slowly died down to a frightened hush. "Get away from us!" she cried, hoping to stir some instinct in the figure. The words came out sharper, more desperate than meant, and for a moment, she thought the mask would shatter, that something human might emerge. But it didn't. "Crying won't save you," it snarled, taking a slow, slithering step toward the car. Shadows surged forth, sweeping against the vehicle like a dark tide, scraping against the metal body with an eerie, whispering sound. The headlights flickered beneath the strain, the feeble rays of light drowning in the malign energy that surrounded them. "What does it want?" her son whimpered, glancing sideways at Sarah, eyes wide with terror. "I don't know," she replied, though she sensed that it fed off their fear, something primal and ancient lurking behind the mask, longing to torment. She leaned closer to the kids, the flashlight's beam wavering, reflecting her growing unease. Summoning all her courage, she revved the engine again, praying it would respond with strength. The sputtering echoed, but the roar of the creature was louder, drowning out her hope. Its gnarled hands crested the edge of the window, curling around the glass as if the air were becoming liquid. "Panic! More!" She shouted again, feeling the urgency rise to an unbearable pitch, fighting against the silent dread that threatened to paralyze them. The kids obeyed, their young voices striking against the night as fear poured from them, filling the cramped car. The figure recoiled, but a twisted smile emerged, revealed sinister understanding as it took in their terror. "It's hungry," it slithered, its voice a mocking lull, laced with malice. "You've fed it, now feed me." Sarah gritted her teeth. "No!" she shouted, but the words felt weak against the horror creeping into her mind. The thought of losing them made her insides wrench painfully. The air grew thick, dense with dread, and she raised the flashlight again, aiming it at the figure, hoping against everything that it could be chased away. But as the light flashed across the mask, something felt wrong. The eye's black voids seemed to absorb the light instead of reflecting it, sucking hope from the air around them. Something in her gut twisted, a realization striking her like a bolt. "We have to get out," she whispered, more to herself than to them. It was a maddening thought, a spark of desperation igniting within her. "But we can't outside," the shadows swarmed. Figures writhed beneath the street lamps, eyes glinting like insects emerging from the dark, crawling closer, undulating in sync with the figure's movements. They were everywhere, threatening to consume them, and Sarah knew the walls of the car were no longer a sanctuary but a trap. "Get ready to fight," she commanded, adrenaline and fear pooling into determination as she glanced between the kids. "Mom," they moaned, but she saw the flicker of resolve in their eyes too. They would have to face the creature. Not all their screams could save them now. With a deafening screech, the creature lunged again, the world darkening around them. "Now!" Sarah shouted, springing into action. And just as the glass began to shatter, everything lurched violently, then silence. Sarah's heart thudded too loudly in her ears, pulses of fear racing as the shadows hung heavy. Had they escaped the inevitable? Had they truly fought back, or was it merely the calm before the storm? Through that silence came something else, a soft echo of laughter. It was hollow yet filled with joy. "Did you think that was all?" the mask taunted from within the darkness. "You've only just begun to see." As the laughter swallowed the night, the true horror of what loomed ahead pierced through the air. What lay deeper in the shadows, ready to unveil itself, made her blood run cold. And in that moment, she understood. They weren't just battling one monstrous figure. They were at the start of something sprawling, horrifying, and ominously alive. With renewed dread, she whispered, "What did it mean?" The answer loomed, dark and heavy in the air, waiting just outside their fragile cocoon. The ground beneath them tilted as the car's engine sputtered, a barely audible whimpering from her children merging with the ominous laughter resonating from the darkness. Then chaos erupted. The headlights, her last line of defense, flickered and blinked out in rapid bursts, leaving them swathed in a suffocating blackness where the outline of the mask remained a constant derision. She could feel the heat rising off the figure as it leaned closer, breathing, a fetid stench that filled the car like a foul mist. "Mom," her daughter's voice trembled, small yet filled with a dreadful understanding. "Keep quiet," Sarah said, wrestling against the urge to scream. Every ounce of threat seemed to distort the air, each second stretching like thin rubber, ready to snap. The tension was palpable. They were trapped, frozen in a nightmare that held no mercy. The shadows danced outside, moving closer, and with them, an unending dread that twisted something deep within Sarah. She had to act. There was no choice. They had to reclaim control or go down fighting. Sarah reached for the gearshift, adrenaline thrumming in her veins. "Hold on!" she roared, flipping on the high beams, praying for a miracle. As light erupted in front of them like a beacon, the world returned, but not as she remembered. The street was empty. No figures, no shadows. Just the dim, flickering glow of the dying bulbs overhead. But the laughter persisted, this time layered with whispers taunting her. "You think you can run?" The voice slithered through the car, coiling sinisterly around them. Panic shot through her. "Drive. Just drive," she urged, but the engine purred in defiance, sputtering as if the very life was being choked out of it. "Mom!" her son yelled, trembling, pointing outside. The shadows, they're coming again. And they were. The darkness folded in on itself, sharp edges protruding as more figures emerged, each one a grotesque mockery of humanity. Slender limbs impossibly elongated, their mouths stretched and open, and eyes that shone like coals in a fire. The moment she met their gaze, a wild flash of despair coursed through her. "Go!" Sarah screamed as the grip of terror closed around them once more. She slammed the pedal to the floor, feeling the car lurch, and then deathly quiet. The engine coughed, the darkness closing in, shadows creeping across the windshield. "Mom! It won't start!" The children echoed her panic, their voices climbing higher, ringing in her head like warnings from some distant nightmare. "Try again. Please!" she begged, fear driving her to the brink. She turned the key, each twist echoing like a countdown to their doom. The engine groaned, then one more sputter, a flicker of life. Yes. But it wasn't enough. The shadows swelled around them, forming grotesque bodies dancing with malevolence. Sarah could feel the thrum of despair growing stronger, an invisible weight pushing against the metal of their car. Sweat trickled down her back, and with it came clarity. They needed an escape plan, something they could hold onto when everything felt out of reach. She grabbed the flashlight and pointed it toward the figure now looming impossibly close. It raised a hand, fingers like gnarled twigs, and she felt the weight of eternity behind that mask. "I'll give you what you crave," it hissed, the voice heavy with the promise of nightmares. "No!" she shouted, her voice cracking as adrenaline and terror collided within her. "You can take us, but not without a fight." The laughter erupted around them, sharp and mocking. She swallowed hard, gripping the children's hands tightly. "On three, we break the window and run," she whispered, her voice steadier than she felt. They nodded, eyes glistening with fear but ready to act. 1, 2, 3. The car erupted in motion. Windows exploded outward, shards scattering into the night sky. Behind them came the rage of darkness, darkness that would not let them escape easily. "Run!" Sarah shouted, tearing free as she dragged her children out into the unknown, the laughter of the masked figure haunting their steps. But as they raced toward the fading light, a new, chilling sound vibrated through the air, a low growl resonating from all sides. They were not free yet. And as a moonless night swirled above, they learned the truth: the hunt had only just begun. A new terror awaited them, lurking in shadows that moved with hungry anticipation. What lay ahead would be far worse than they could imagine. What had they unleashed? The cold air wrapped around them like a funeral shroud as they sprinted into the night, hearts pounding like wild drums. Sarah could barely see the outline of the trees, their branches gnarled and twisted like the figures that had once surrounded them. The sense of dread clung to her skin, slick and clammy. "Mom, what do we do?" her son gasped, each word a desperate plea choked out between ragged breaths. The shadows chased them, rippling ahead like liquid night, and with every glance behind, she felt her heart sink further. "Find shelter!" she shouted, scanning the darkness for any sign of safety, a flicker of light, a refuge, even a shadow of hope. A few yards ahead, she spotted a ramshackle old house, its weathered boards rotting in the humid air. It leaned precariously, as if ready to crumble beneath the weight of secrets long buried. "Over there!" she commanded, urgency propelling her forward. They dashed toward the crumbling structure, the growl behind them shifting into an almost gleeful crescendo, like hungry wolves scenting blood. "Mom!" her daughter cried. "What if something's inside?" "We have no choice," Sarah replied, her voice a mixture of fear and determination, the adrenaline fogging her judgment. They rushed up the creaking steps, the wood moaning beneath them as if warning them of the frailty of their choice. Inside, the air was stale and thick, saturated with the oppressive smell of mildew. Their footsteps echoed through the empty hallway, the sounds swallowed by the shadows that lurked in every corner. She fought the urge to panic, gripping her flashlight tighter. She flicked it on, the beams slicing through the darkness, revealing peeling wallpaper and dusty furniture. "Quick! Lock the door!" she said, her children obeying instinctively, hearts racing to the rhythm of their fear. As her son slammed the door shut, Sarah could hear the cacophony outside, a surging tide of whispers, laughter, and the unmistakable sound of scratching. Something was out there, desperate to get in. "Mom, what do we do now?" her daughter whimpered, eyes wide, filled with terror. "Stay close," Sarah instructed, but already, the shadows were creeping in, visible in the corners of her eyes. She felt a cold prickling on her neck, as if something was watching them. She led them further into the house, each step careful. Rooms filled with dust and decay awaited them, like silent witnesses to what had once lived there. The flashlight flickered, a warning, perhaps. She banged the side, willing it to hold. In the dim light, they finally came across a dilapidated living room, furniture strewn about like discarded dreams. A faint flicker caught her attention, a motion just beyond the edge of her vision. "Did you see that?" her son whispered, trembling. "Quiet." Sarah hushed, fear knotting her stomach as the scratching sound intensified. It was no longer outside, it had reached them. Suddenly, a chilling realization crashed down upon her: there was no escape. The figures from the woods could slip through walls like they were air. The house had been a trap, inviting them in before it sealed their fate. "Mom! Look!" her daughter cried, as something fluttered in the darkness, a piece of paper held against the wall, illuminated just enough by the flashlight. It was covered in old, faded scrawls, a warning. "Stay here," Sarah ordered, not waiting for their descent. She moved closer, the words digging into her brain like thorns. "Those who enter do not leave, darkness is the key." As dread pooled in her stomach, the whispers turned urgent, demanding attention. She felt the shadows thicken, closing in, squeezing in all around her. "Mom, please!" her son urged, his voice breaking like fragile glass. What did they unleash? And what awaited them in the darkness that was inching toward them, clawing at the edges of their reality? With a quick glance back, Sarah's heart plummeted as the shadows took form, grotesque distortions of faces she'd once known. She had to make a choice: to confront whatever was coming or find the strength to fight back. But then, amid the chaos, a voice echoed from the depths of despair, luring her in with a sickening familiarity. "Join us forever." Her blood ran cold. What price would she pay to save her children? The room felt like it was closing in, the oppressive darkness whispering secrets that made Sarah's skin crawl. She could hear the shape of despair gathering just beyond her reach, a pulsating echo of her own fear reflected in the shadows. Her children huddled closer, wide eyes searching her for answers, but all she could find was uncertainty coiling around her heart. "Mom, I don't want to be here," her daughter whimpered, and Sarah's heart shattered a little more. "Please." The scratching intensified, a frantic reminder of the figures outside. She had to act. A jolt of primal instinct surged within her. They couldn't linger here any longer. There was no future where they just waited to see if the figures would come for them. "Sure, we'll be okay," Sarah hushed, though doubt danced at the edges of her confidence. "We need to find another way out." As they crept toward the back of the house, her chest tightened with apprehension. The flashlight flickered ominously, casting a weak glow that barely pierced the growing shadow. The walls, once silent, seemed to thrum with unseen voices, warning her of something lurking just beyond her sight. "Keep moving," she urged, her voice low, almost urgent, as she felt the pressure of fear swirl around her. She spotted a door at the end of the narrow hallway, splintered wood and peeling paint drawing her desperate attention. A way out! Rushing to it, Sarah could feel the air thicken. Each step sent ice running through her veins. "Stay close," she whispered as they approached. Her fingers fumbled over the knob, trembling with the weight of countless stories told through the long night. But just as her heart soared with the possibility of escape, the door refused to budge, jamming stubbornly beneath her force. "No! Come on!" She banged her shoulder against it, the impact reverberating through her bones like a warning bell. And then came the laughter, a sickening chorus from the shadows, an echoing reminder that they weren't alone. The darkness pulsed, an analogy of a heartbeat, feeding off the terror they unwittingly provided. "Mom!" her son cried out again, and when she turned, the creatures had just emerged from the far side of the living room, their grotesque forms framed by dim shadows, eyes glinting like pitiless stars caught in a blackened sky. "Don't look!" Sarah shouted, instinctively shielding her children with her body. Each shadow whispered promises of despair, and a shiver coursed through her as she realized how close they were. There was both dread and familiarity in their knotted forms, contouring against the wall, as if they had been birthed from her worst fears. "Please! We just want to go home." Her daughter's voice mingled with the cutting laughter, a raw wound of innocence being stripped away. With newfound resolve, Sarah aimed her flashlight toward the dark mass, directly connecting with the shadows that surged closer. "Stay back!" she yelled, a command birthed from within the depths of her maternal ferocity. "You will not take my children!" For a moment, the laughter faltered, a ripple of doubt echoed amongst the figures. She could see them hesitate, a flicker of uncertainty dimming their eager approach. The flashlight's clarity momentarily illuminated the contours of their shadowy forms, revealing the twisted faces housed within. "They feed on fear," Sarah breathed, the realization dawning. They craved her children's terror, and she had given it to them, letting it coil around her heart like a snake. "Now they can starve." "Mom, what do we do?" Her son's voice was a quiet plea, filled with dread, but she couldn't falter. She turned and faced her children. "We fight," she declared. They needed to reclaim their power. "Remember our sound? That scream we shared in the car? Let us do it again." "Yeah!" yelled her son, a gleam of fierce determination igniting within him. "On 3. Sarah counted. 1, 2, 3. They screamed, unleashing the raw intensity of their fear and defiance into the air, shaking the very essence of the room. The walls trembled as if pushed back by the force of their shared strength, notes of unity weaving a tapestry of resistance. The figures recoiled, their shadows twisting and squirming, gripping at each other's forms in confusion as if she had exposed their weakness. "You can't take us!" Sarah shouted, her voice growing stronger, more defiant. "You want to turn us into nightmares." The combination of their fierce cries and Sarah's unwavering determination morphed the energy in the room. The shadows twisted away as if the light of their collective strength was forcing back the darkness. Then, with one swift motion, she slammed her fist against the door one last time. The sound echoed through the haunted house, a rallying cry of hope. The door burst open, splintering just enough to free them from this darkened prison. "Run!" she shouted, grabbing her children's hands tightly as they raced forward. But as they surged into the night, the shadows writhed in a frenzy, desperately reaching for them, grappling at their heels, a torrent of rage awakening at the challenge. "Faster!" Sarah gasped, adrenaline fueling their flight. They dashed down the steps and back into the cold night air, each breath thick with urgency. The humid night stretched endlessly before them, but light flickered just beyond. Back toward the street, across that barrier into the throbbing pulse of life, she could almost taste safety, just out of reach. But as they neared, she turned one last time, facing the shadows still clawing at the house, still whispering her name, taunting her existence. "I'm not afraid of you," she declared, resolutely, and for the first time, she felt the truth behind her words. "Let us go, now," she urged, and with a final surge, they bolted toward the path leading home, hearts racing like the unfolding dawn. And as they reached the street, the darkness howled behind them, shrieking in frustration as the light engulfed them, leaving only a chilling memory behind, an echo of something they'd fought hard to escape. They had faced shadows, but they were alive, together, and that was the light that would guide them forward from now on. As they ran, laughter echoed like a fading whisper around them, the chilling hint of unresolved darkness, lurking, waiting. But Sarah had learned that she and her children were a force stronger than fear. They would never become lost shadows. With that clarity in her heart, she grasped the hands of her children and sprinted down the path, inching away from fear and leisure into the embrace of light and possibility. They wouldn't forget, not for a single moment. But they would face whatever darkness dared to challenge them next together. And that was something no shadow could ever take away. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and show your support. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this intense conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to support the channel now.